we've all been taught to see failure as avoidable, and that our inability to avoid it means that there's something wrong with us.
Yeah.
Right. And I'll just use myself as an example. I think that probably most people looking at my career from the outside would say, man, that guy's had a lot of success.
I'd say the same.
And they would be correct.
We've been talking for about 20 minutes about just phenomenal like creators and Steve Jobs, Da Vinci, Michelangelo. And you just made a really good point. We're just going to start up what you just said.
That's awesome, man.
And yeah, where you said you don't think you can be creative by being organized. Can you kind of expand on that a little bit more? Because I think that's a really interesting concept, because I consider myself creative, hate to just say that, and organized. But now that you say that, it's like, well, am I actually being that creative? Because part of creativity comes by not being organized.
Yeah. So I do think that you have to be organized.
Yeah.
Because the rest of it is so profoundly messy.
Yeah.
That if you don't have a structure, you're going to have a real problem. Right. But what I really meant was that the creative process is all about failure. And failure, particularly when it intersects with our fragile human egos and self-image and all this kind of stuff, is an extremely messy combination. And so that's why, whether it's marketing analytics or whatever, right? Yeah. If creativity is problem solving, then guess what? That means you're going to have a lot of failure, right? This is like, the light bulb situation, right? At the end of the, Edison said, well, actually what I really know is 993 ways not to do it, right? Which is actually, for the next guy, incredibly valuable knowledge.
Ooh.
Right?
Yep.
So if you communicate that, you've just saved the next guy all of that time, frustration, energy, everything else. I mean, what is that worth? That is worth a ton, right? I mean, this is one of the reasons why the Allies, and we can argue the morality of it for sure, but the Allies had Operation Paperclip at the end of World War II, where they went after all the German rocket scientists and brought them to the United States, right? Is that they knew that these guys had seen all kinds of failure.
Yep. And
so by grabbing them, they were guaranteeing that what happened next, which ended up being NASA, right? Yeah. Would short circuit all those failures, because no one was going to do it again. Yeah. Everyone had that knowledge of what to avoid, right? So that is, I mean, it's, and you see this a lot. You and I were just talking about the relationship between Medici and Leonardo da Vinci. Right? And the thing that Medici was really good at as an autocrat, right, was laying down the law and creating structure within which da Vinci could be incredibly creative, while still meeting Medici's requirements, right? And that right there has tremendous value.
So do you think it's important, like when you are trying to, let's just like put it to marketing, like if you're trying to have like a creative process and come up with something super creative, it's important to have that structure around like, oh, follow these guidelines, but make it wide enough where people can be creative within those guidelines, kind of like we saw with the relationship?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is actually why the ultimate definition of this, or the box or the space, right, is analytically led, right? Because creativity at the end of the day, I know that this is probably not the way a lot of people think about it, but I just want to kind of ask everyone to follow me here for a second. It is incredibly binary, actually, most of the time. So when we say creative, we're not talking about a painting. So you can like it and I cannot like it, and that's just a matter of taste, right? But in a business context, creativity is problem solving. And so what you really want is you want something utterly pragmatic in the end that is only defined by whether it worked and also whether it was, legal, moral, and ethical. But it's all about, did it work? And the only way to really establish that is the use of analytics. And I'm using that in the broadest sense of the word analytics, right? So, I think that particularly in a business context, leaving the governance of creativity to individual opinion in the same way that you would do that with a painting, right, is a huge mistake.
So you think we should be like applying, just so I'm interpreting this, like we should be applying analytics to like our creative process, because we can be as creative as we want to be, but we want to make sure we have the data to actually back it up.
So if I ask you to solve a problem, but I refuse, I'm exaggerating for effect here, okay?
Yeah.
If I ask you to solve a problem, but I refuse to tell you what the problem is,
okay,
then have I put any limits on you? No. Is that good? No, it's not. Right? I've given you theoretically maximum freedom to be creative, but actually I've put you in a prison, because how do you know what is creative if you don't know the problem, right? And so the other part to this, so life is just, once again, we're back to life is a series of numerator denominator relationships, right? And so we're saying, hey, you're going to solve this problem, but it also needs to be solved in kind of the following ways, or there are aspects to the problem that need to be satisfied, might be a better way of putting it, right? And so this is what Medici learned to do so well with Da Vinci, was specifying the problem and specifying the kind of solution or the end game, right, that you needed, without telling Leonardo how to do it. And so as a result, he got maximally creative solutions to problems. Because he didn't say, by the way, I don't see how in the world you could possibly do this unless you also did X, Y, and Z. Because you've just put an additional creative constraint on Leonardo. And do you really want to do that with Leonardo da Vinci? No, you don't, right? And that's a purely economic decision for somebody like Medici, because Medici was his sponsor primarily. He was spending vast sums of money on Leonardo and his projects. And so it had a real cost. It wasn't just fun or cool. Right? And so Medici had to make sure that whatever came out the other end of Leonardo's creative pipe, that actually solved the problem.
Interesting. So we have this creative process, but we actually need to be solving a problem at the end. I'm curious though, do you think like those few parameters works with everyone? Because Da Vinci was obviously like intellectually like very, very special. Do you think that process works with like everybody, or does it vary from person to person on what are the constraints?
Well, I think it absolutely varies from person to person, because or even team to team, right? I don't see how you could possibly say that it's a one size fits all thing. But I will say this, a leader's responsibility is to understand the team, understand the limits of the team, give them just enough guidance where they have what they need to solve the problem. So if you're working with somebody like Da Vinci, you can afford to be incredibly specific on certain things and utterly non-specific in others, right? Very minimalist guidance. In certain other situations, right, you might have to build out the box, problem box, right, with a little more definition, so that then the people that's working on the solution can react appropriately given their level of knowledge and capability and all this kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, the human being is just amazingly creative.
Yeah.
If they understand what the problem is, and if they believe that what they do, which inevitably will consist of a lot of failure,
Yeah.
is that they won't be punished for the failure, right? I think this is actually the number one problem in innovation, is that businesses tend to punish failure.
Yeah.
And actually, as we've just established, right? I mean, Edison's a great example, but there's many, many others. Failure is priceless. It is literally priceless. If you codify it and you make sure that it's communicated as a, do not do this, don't even go there, right? What have you done? You have made your team more effective and more efficient than they otherwise would have been.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting concept. For innovation to actually happen, you need to make all these 900 previous mistakes and be able to learn from those, because it also saves someone that's trying to innovate the time of not making those same mistakes you did. But that also comes down to like documenting your process, right? And actually putting it out there for people to see. And I don't think we see that enough on like LinkedIn, Twitter, people actually celebrating success and like what they did. Why do you think that is? Like, why don't people celebrate failures more and treat it as a success?
Because I think that we've all been taught to see failure as avoidable, and that our inability to avoid it means that there's something wrong with us.
Yeah.
Right. And I'll just use myself as an example. I think that probably most people looking at my career from the outside would say, man, that guy's had a lot of success.
I'd say the same.
And they would be correct. But if you atomize my career, let me just tell you, is one of the people who was present.
Yeah.
There was a huge number of failures. Right? And some of them were related to levels of understanding that I didn't have, or, all that kind of stuff. But some of them, many of them were, for lack of a better way of putting it, they were character issues, right? They were, like one of the things that I talk about a lot from an analytical perspective is that if you look at machine learning, which is a broad concept, but most people understand it today as pattern matching, right?
Yep.
Your intuition as a human being is your personal private machine learning. You are not born with intuition. Okay. You're born with instinct, right? Yep. But intuition is something that you accumulate over your life based upon the data of what happened to you and how you interpret that and set that up for pattern matching later, right? Yep. And just like with machine learning, if you have high quality data that is accurate and giving you a correct pattern match, right? Yep. Then incredibly useful, right? But how many of us know people who seem to, in one area of life, maybe two, they just routinely always make the wrong decision? Yeah. Right. Yep. This is mainly because their machine learning, their internal machine learning had bad training data. And they actually believe that black is white and white is black in that particular area of life, right? So this is why it's just so important to realize that no one is going to do it perfectly, and that at the end of the day, we are all riding a wave, and we do not control the wave. Yep. And our success is all about being able, or failure is all about our ability or inability to react, to sense changes in the wave. So you're on a surfboard, right? Yep. and you can sense it, and you shift your weight this way or that way, and you do this or you do that, right? And if you do it all right, you end up standing up on the board on the beach, right? And if you don't, you wipe out. And you're guaranteed, if you surf enough, you're going to do both.
Yep.
But you're going to wipe out far more than the other. So does that mean that you shouldn't surf? No. Right.
That's what I think. That's actually a mindset shift that I've had recently in the past like 2 months or so. It's really like, I don't need to be perfect 100% of the time, but I need to be consistently like great at what I'm doing. I'm not going to be perfect. I'm not a perfect human being, but I need to be consistently good at what I'm doing. And one way to do that is from what I do personally is just like reflect on those mistakes that I make in like my job or in podcasts, or in freelance, being like, okay, where did I go wrong? What did I learn? What could I do next time? Is there a way that you learn from your mistakes? Is there like some sort of framework you have, or is it just more like, okay, I'm going to internalize this and know next time?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the framework for me is, you really pay a lot of attention to cause and effect.
That's cool.
And sometimes you don't have a full picture. And so bringing other people who have been there before you into the mix and say, what am I missing here? What do I need to understand that you think maybe I'm not understanding, right? So this is the issue of cross-pollination. This is the creative synergy. Again, let's get back and let's really get it straight that creativity is problem solving. It's not how well you draw.
Yeah.
Right. And so synergistic creativity is where it's at, right? This is teams of teams. This is you and me. This is your best friend and you. It's, whatever, right? This is why mentorship is so important.
Yeah.
I mean, we just got through announcing a new class of proof advisors. And these are all just unbelievable people.
Yeah.
That just having them in proof is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But when you sit down there and their whole purpose is to synergize, right? Is to essentially say, well, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Why are you being stupid in this area? Right. I mean, that is really, that's what they do. Right. And so when we talk about diversity and inclusion, example, right? I mean, there's an obvious moral and ethical component to this, but there's also this incredibly pragmatic thing that says, the more people I have around me who are not like me, and if I ask them the right questions and listen to them, they will not only make me better through cross-pollination, but they will save my ass again and again and again, right? Because of what they can see that I can't see. And that's a super important thing. I guess it was I've probably been really aware of that for 18 years, 19 years, something like that. And I would, when I was leading big teams in big corporations, the whole deal was you have to be great. Okay. But you can't be like me.
Yeah. I love that.
Cannot be like me. Because it's too dangerous. If you have a bunch of people that in your surrounding, you basically have all these yes people, you're going to all go over the cliff together sooner or later. Right. And that's bad. So.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's that I really, so I grew up in like Iowa. There, just to put out there, like there's not a whole lot of like diversity here. And so moving out to Boston, where I was part of teams, where I was part of communities that are way more diverse, it really opened my mind of like, wow, like you grew up way different than I did. You had way different experiences than I did. And combining those together, it's just incredible. It's like, oh, I never thought about that. Or like, oh, we could approach it like that. And it really just stems back to like, oh, you were kind of raised like this. I was raised like this. And putting those together it is beautiful synergy where it's like, wow, this is a great, great partnership we can do here, or great teams. I want to go back to like the teams aspect. Are there like a couple things that come to mind when the highest performing teams, the ones that you've been a part of, are there some quality and characteristics that stand out amongst those teams?
Yeah, it's actually, one definition of brand is that
Mhm.
it is the combination of awareness, confidence, and trust, right?
Ah,
Which, the acronym is sort of interesting. I did not create this at all, but it's ACT, right? And when you have awareness, confidence, and trust, you find it easier to act and make better decisions and all that kind of stuff, right? And so, I tend to think about this a lot in terms of professional sports teams
mhm.
where like let's take the Harlem Globetrotters. Okay. If you've ever watched them do their thing on the court,
Mhm.
super obvious that they have total awareness of each other,
Mm,
total confidence in their each other's ability, and that they trust that that person is going to be at the right place on the court at the right time, right? And so they transcend the idea of team at some point, and they kind of become an organism
that's
all
cool.
themselves, right? And I have actually I've had the incredible privilege and thrill of leading 3 teams in my career that achieve kind of an organism status.
Mm,
And it's something that I would wish for everyone to experience
yep.
because you just can't beat it. I mean, whatever you think is the biggest thrill, it's going to be tough. You're going to be in some pretty hardcore competition with the idea of working with people that have kind of transcended, right,
Mm.
a team and become an organism, right? I mean, that is, man, it's just unreal. It's just, it's transcendent is what it really is.
Yeah. I mean, how did it get to that aspect though, where you had awareness, confidence, and trust? I mean, how did it get to there? I mean, it couldn't have just been, oh, let's all hop in the same room and boom, we're all have each other's like backs
No,
here. I mean,
I mean, in
that
these
point.
cases, right? I mean, number one, and so you don't always know this, right, when you're
Yeah.
getting started, but they all ended up being just, to your point, individually really, really good,
Yep.
right? So this is what inspires the confidence in their colleagues, right? Is that
Mhm.
everyone is individually really good. And to your earlier point, right, there's so much in the world that we don't control that the little bit that we do control becomes exponentially more important to control well.
That's a good thought.
Okay. So this is a situation where we typically, in fact, in all 3 of these cases, there was kind of this crucible early in the team forming where it was really hairy situation, totally not manufactured, totally existential,
Yeah.
right? And people welded, they formed this team, right? And it's not just, I mean, leadership is super important, but most of this, when it happens between people or small groups within the team, right? And they kind of work it out themselves. So if you're the leader and you think it's somehow because you were such a great leader, I got a news flash for you, right? You were important, but there was a lot more to it than just you, right?
Mhm.
So that was that. I mean, that's really it, right? And one way to really know that your team is like that is that whenever it comes to an end, and it always does,
Yep.
right? There is literally a grieving process that you cannot replicate
Interesting.
if if it wasn't that. If it wasn't the organism, right?
Mhm.
Because you're redividing what has become indivisible. And it's really painful. It's sort of like live dissection, right? I mean, it's just not pleasant at all, right?
Mhm.
And so I think it's actually, it's different, but it's sort of emotionally the same. It's sort of like one of the reasons why divorce is so hard, right? Is that you've bonded with this person and then you're moving apart again, right? And there's actually, almost like, metaphorically speaking, a tearing of flesh, right? And that is that, that sucks. And so, but that is in the sense of being a kind of like a really sucky but poignant validation of your team's dynamic. If you have grief, like real grief about it, right? Then that's a really good sign.
Interesting. What's been the biggest difference from leading teams at some of the largest corporations at like Honeywell, all the way to like ProofAnalytics? What's like the difference of like dynamics between the teams? Are there any differences?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a ton of differences because every person is unique.
Yeah.
And then combine unique people in unique combinations in unique circumstances, right? You just get a lot of uniqueness, right? I think that the most important thing that I could probably say about that, for me, what I've learned is that as the leader, I work for them. Right? It's my job to be whatever they need me to be, as opposed to them conforming to me. And that is actually really hard. Like, it is so much easier to say what I just said.
Yeah.
To actually do it, right? And I consider myself to be fairly progressed on that journey. But all you have to do is talk to my teammates at Proof, and they will point out very easily all the times that I failed that, right? And so I think that, this is one of the great paradoxes of failure as well, because you hate to fail. You wouldn't be who you are if you didn't hate to fail. And yet, understanding that you are imperfect and that you are not going to be the master of the universe or the mistress of the universe, right? That is a narcissistic concept, right? Is actually very freeing. It's very liberating, right? And it doesn't mean that you don't like there's a lot of times when I really don't like the fact that I feel liberated by the fact that I'm imperfect. Right? I mean, that's a lot to swallow right there. But I mean, our ego is so strong, right? It's so strong that actually the only way that I have learned how to deal with it, because mine is exceptionally strong, is to be at war with it constantly. I mean, I am shoving it in its box all the time, right? And it's not something you ever permanently transcend, right? But you need to, what I've found anyway with my teams is that what's so important for them to see and to feel is that A, I'm aware of it, and B, that I'm constantly on guard and at war with it, right? And that my intention is to be what they need me to be and to work for them, not them for me, right? And this is what servant leadership is about, right? But I mean, it's sort of, the term servant leadership has gotten kind of this soft association. Let me tell you, it is so hard. It is so freaking hard to be a servant leader, to say I work, here I am, I have worked for 25 or 30 years or whatever it is, right, to reach this position in my life and in my profession. And I'm now working for all of you.
Ooh.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's really what it is. Right. And I think that, I mean, you show me an example of where this is not true and I will totally listen to it. But if every CEO, if every GM, if every BU leader, if every politician took that point of view and successfully implemented it even 25% of the time, the aggregate effect in the positive direction would be immense.
Oh yeah.
It would be transformational, maybe even just 10% of the time, right? That is, I mean, like one of the things we talk about in analytics a lot, right, is everyone thinks that they have to have an analytical result that allows them to improve their decision-making by 20%. That's just, number one, not going to happen. That's not real life, right? But more to the point, let's look at it this way. If you have the right analytics that allow you to make a 0.5% better decision every day for 365 days on a compounded basis, just like money, okay? A compounded basis, at the end of the year, you'd be around 2,000% better. Now, 2,000% is nothing to sneer at.
No.
I mean, that you are guaranteed to get your bonus and then some.
Oh yeah.
Right. So let's discount it again, right? Let's say it's 1/4% or 1/8 of 1%. I mean, you're still just killing it. Right. And so this is where I think people honestly don't understand what makes great performance, right? It's small changes. I mean, significant. Sometimes you have to make a significant change. That's without a doubt, but it's actually the minority of the time.
Yeah. So it's making those small changes each day because, as you said, they just compounded. I mean, you can apply that to business and analytics, but you can also apply that like to your personal life as well, getting 1%.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you, again, right. I mean, you think about your 401k, right? If it were to improve day in and day out, 1% per day, compounded effect at the end of the year would be 4,000%.
Oh,
I mean, come on, man. I want more than that. I mean, if you do, you are a greedy, right?
Yep.
So
I want to ask a question. We're winding down on time. We're getting to our conclusion here. Going back to like that personal growth, like compounding effect. Is there a stage in your life where you felt like you grew like the most? I think because like right now I'm looking back at my life, I'm 23 right now. It's like, okay, I'm a totally different person than when I was 20 years old. And I'm super happy with that. I am incredibly proud of the person that I am. And if I was 20 years old looking at 23, I'd be incredibly happy. So just for context there, where the question's coming from, I mean, is there a period of your life where you felt like you grew the most and like how you're always evolving?
Yeah, very definitely. One of the things I'll say before I answer your question directly is that it's never something that you can pursue at the same rate endlessly, right? There are natural plateaus where you're consolidating what you've learned into yourself before you then start climbing again.
I just got chills to that. Go ahead.
That's super, super important. I would say actually that the last 5.5 years of doing proof have been like I'm just going to be really transparent here, right? I love what we do. I love what I do, right? But if I had known in 2016 what it was going to cost me
Mm.
to do it, and I don't mean necessarily monetarily, but in pretty much every other way, then I might have totally chickened out. Like, I really believe that this is one of the reasons why we don't have the ability to really know the future too much, right? Particularly in kind of the more of the green field, blue sky, blue ocean kind of way, right? Is that if we knew it, we would go hide in a cave.
Yeah.
Right. And so, but I came out of large corporations, really successful in those situations, and believed that I had become very T-shaped as a leader, right? So a lot of expertise, that's the vertical thing. And then the horizontal is a lot of contextual understanding and knowledge, right?
That's interesting.
And then when I started doing proof, I realized, man, I had not even started to climb in some of these areas, right? I mean, I was still on, historically I'd been on almost level ground, right? And that was, so I think that, again, this is the ego, right? If you are really an intelligent person and you have a lot of intellectual horsepower, and all of a sudden you run into things that make you feel really stupid or inadequate, you have a tendency to either reject them, run away from them, or you embrace them, but they cost you too much in confidence, right? You go from I'm the master of the universe to I'm a sniveling worm, right? And not both of those are incorrect. Both of those are wrong, right? And so I think anyway, I'm told, thankfully, that I am a much better person today, that setting everything else aside, that when you do an entrepreneurial journey, it's sort of like money and power. So money and power don't corrupt. They actually reveal the corruption that's already in us. Right. Entrepreneurship is sort of very similar to that, right? It will reveal all the holes. And so you will either come out of that as a narcissistic denialist, right? Or you will have really embraced it and become at least somewhat better, right? And I think that choice, obviously one is way better than the other, but one is also way more painful. Right. I mean, it's very easy to understand why people do the denialist approach, right? Because we're essentially talking about open heart surgery here. I mean, we really are. I mean, without anesthesia. Let me just tell you, the popular stories about entrepreneurship, particularly in SaaS, are based on a very small fraction of 1% of SaaS companies and founders, right? The rest of which are summed up as follows, and very accurately, that SaaS companies, SaaS startups, are either in trouble or dead. That's it. Right. So the number of them that are somehow transcendently triumphant is not a basis for you going in and being a SaaS entrepreneur. It's just not. So I would say that is, I mean, I would honestly tell you that I would not willingly go through the process again, because it really was very challenging. But I'm glad that I am who I am today because of it.
That's awesome. So last question then, as we wrap up here, I mean, what would have to happen within the next 3 years for you to look back and be like, wow, I transformed as a person. I'm really happy where we have with Proof Analytics where we become, or like what we become? I mean, what would be some 3-year metrics that you would be looking for to like really look back and be like, I'm proud?
Well, I think that, so speaking in terms of proof for a second,
Yeah.
I think that, well, I know what my shareholders would want me to say.
Yeah.
That would, I mean, everyone does SaaS
Yeah.
pretty much because of an exit, right? So that would be there. But I mean, great companies are purchased, not sold, and so
Mhm.
right now we're just trying to be the best company we can be, right? The for me personally, it's really important to me that everyone that is involved in proof feel that it was worth it,
That's awesome.
right? Because everyone is paying a price.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone is paying an opportunity cost between
Yep.
doing proof and doing whatever else they could have been doing if they weren't doing proof, right? So it really matters to me a lot, actually, that's the case. For me, personally, as an individual, like improvements
Yeah.
wise, so this is going to sound a little strange, but I would want to be at a place where when it was time to do the next thing for whatever reason,
Mm-hmm.
that I held everything loosely enough
Mm-hmm.
where it just was like doing that next thing, whether it's exiting or whatever, it just happens and it's all the way it's supposed to be,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so that is, and the main reason why I say that is that it would be evidence to me that I was winning my battle against my own ego, right? And that's really important, right? I mean, I don't think I will ever get there. I really don't. But if I could pass from this world with some relatively small, below 50% fraction of the ego that I came into this world with, that would be like 2 thumbs up.
I love that. It really is the toughest battle, because I would say I have an ego as well. And it's also like putting it away and making sure that I'm staying in equilibrium as possible. So yeah, I definitely resonate that is the toughest battle. But I want to give 2 thumbs up to you, because this was an awesome podcast episode. We got through a lot of stuff here. And so I want to thank you so much for coming on. You were great. You can plug anything. Where can people find you? Where should people connect with you? Mark, you were so awesome. Thank you so much.
Oh, well, it's a pleasure. You're really terrific in terms of the way you bring it all out. But
Yeah.
from a proof standpoint, if you're in need of automated cause and effect analytics, we tend to focus on go to market and proving that out. We have automated essentially the marketing mix modeling process and scaled it. And so it's proofanalytics.ai. And we do work with Samsung and
Yep.
Bayer and all those kinds of companies, right? And then I am personally and on behalf of Proof, very active on LinkedIn. Email is probably the worst way to reach me. LinkedIn, certainly private mail through LinkedIn, but actually the most effective way to reach me is out in the open, like in a thread.
Yeah.
Just tag me, right? Ask me a question and all that kind of stuff, right? That's the most effective way to get to me. If you reach out to me and you're not trying to sell me something that clearly